Chapter 1. Poor Mute Omega entered the wrong car, unaware it belonged to the Billionaire Alpha. The door closed before he realized the car was already moving. That is how it starts. Not with a scream, not with a chase. Just the soft, mechanical click of a car door. And the slow, terrible understanding that the warm silence on the other side of it belongs to someone else. His name is Tavian Quill. And the world has spent 24 years learning to look right through him. Most people move through the city leaving marks. Footprints in wet concrete. Arguments in corner stores. Laughter that bounces off apartment walls at 2 in the morning. Tavian moves through Greyhaven Harbor like water through a paper cup. Present. Invisible. Already disappearing. He walks its sidewalks, rides its buses, clocks in and out of its buildings without leaving anything behind that a person would notice. Not a sound. Not a raised hand. Not a complaint filed with anyone who could actually act on it. He doesn't speak. Not because he can't form the words inside his head. He forms them fine. Sentences, whole speeches, entire arguments that never make it past the scar running across his throat like a pale seam someone drew with intention. The world decided long ago that silence meant submission. Tavian learned to survive inside that assumption. He learned, specifically, that the less noise he made, the less he reminded people that he was there. And the less he reminded people that he was there, the less likely any of them were to decide his presence was a problem that needed solving. Hi viewers. Have you ever walked into a room and felt like everyone's gaze passed right over you like you weren't even standing there? Drop a comment and tell me when that happened to you. Because what Tavian carries into every room he enters is something heavier than just shyness. It is the weight of a world that decided, long before he had any say in the matter, exactly how much space he was allowed to take up. Tonight is a Thursday, or it feels like one. Time blurs at this job. The Caldwell-Monroe Tower glows 47 floors above the street as Tavian rolls his cleaning cart off the service elevator at 10:45 at night. The lobby crew has already gone home. The office floors are dark except for the motion-activated safety strips near the emergency exits. Thin lines of pale blue that blink on when he passes and blink off after he moves away. Like the building itself is watching him and then deciding he isn't worth keeping track of. He works alone most nights. That part, at least, he prefers. The overnight cleaning contract for Caldwell-Monroe pays just enough to cover his rent on the basement room on Ferris Street, his transit card, and about 10 days' worth of groceries stretched across a month. The math never fully works. It hasn't fully worked in the 2 years he has been doing this. But it keeps him off the street, and for Tavian, off the street is the only goal that matters right now. He starts with the 15th floor. Executive suites. The kind of offices where the trash cans hold more wasted food than his refrigerator holds actual food. Half-eaten sushi. A full salad sealed in plastic that never got opened. A coffee in a paper cup still warm when he picks it up to toss it. He doesn't think about it too long. Thinking about it too long leads somewhere he cannot afford to go at 11 at night when he still has 6 floors left to finish. He works through the 16th. The 17th. His cart moves without noise because he has learned which wheels squeak and adjusted his route so the squeaky ones roll only on carpet. He has been doing this long enough to know the geography of the building the way you know the layout of a home. Which office has a glass desktop that smears if you use the wrong cloth? Which conference room chairs need to be repositioned a specific way or they look wrong in the morning and someone will say something to Daryl, and Daryl will find a way to make that something become Tavian's responsibility. Which bathroom on the 12th floor has a fluorescent tube that is starting to flicker and will need reporting, which he will do through the maintenance portal because that is the only channel available to someone who cannot walk into facilities and explain the situation out loud. Small things. The dozens of small things that add up to invisibility. But also the dozens of small things that add up to competence. To the specific, unacknowledged kind of competence that keeps a job running without anyone crediting the person doing the running. He thinks sometimes, in the long hours between floors, about what his life looks like from the outside. Not in a self-pitying way. More the way you might study a map before navigating a difficult route. Clinically, practically, he is 24 years old. He has a high school diploma he earned in a group home that shut down 6 months after he left it. He has a reference letter from a previous cleaning job that he has never used because using it would require making a phone call. He has a notebook full of careful observations and a mind that processes information faster than most people expect from someone they have already decided not to look at directly. He has, tucked inside the lining of the duffel bag he brings to every shift, a USB drive and 32 printed pages of information that could, if placed in the right hands, end something that should never have been allowed to start. He does not think about the USB drive tonight. He makes a deliberate practice of not thinking about it on shift. Thinking about it on shift makes him check the bag too often, and checking the bag too often makes people notice the bag, and people noticing the bag is a problem he cannot afford. He is halfway through the 14th floor when Supervisor Daryl stops him. Daryl is a heavy-set man who wears his building access lanyard like a badge of military rank. He has worked the overnight supervision contract for 7 years and carries those 7 years in the particular way some men carry authority they were handed rather than earned. He plants himself directly in front of Tavian's cart, arms crossed, feet planted just far enough apart that passing him without acknowledgement would require physical contact. Behind him, 2 other workers drift closer. A slow drift. The kind that says they already know where this is going and have decided to be present for it. Supply rooms short 3 rolls of the commercial-grade paper towels, Daryl says. The heavy ones. The expensive ones. Somebody took them. Tavian looks at him. He reaches for the small spiral notebook clipped to the front pocket of his vest. His hand is steady. He has done this hundreds of times. The notebook is the only voice he has in rooms like this. Daryl puts a hand out. I don't need a note. I need an explanation. There is no explanation without the note. That is a fact. Not a preference, not a choice, a physical reality. Tavian holds the notebook up anyway, opens it to a blank page, presses it into Daryl's line of sight. Daryl does not look at it. He looks at Tavian's face instead, in the way some people look at faces when they have already decided what they want to find there. Guilt. Evasiveness. Something they can use. One of the workers behind him, a tall beta woman with box braids and exhausted eyes, mutters something low enough that she can claim she said nothing at all if called on it. Mute Omegas are always weird about supplies. Nobody corrects her. The other worker, a young man in a gray hoodie, shifts his weight. He is not agreeing out loud. But he is not disagreeing either. In situations like this, not disagreeing is its own kind of agreement. Tavian stands there, notebook open, pen still in his hand. The loudest injustice in a room is rarely the cruelty you can name. It is the assumption that you won't fight back because you never have before. It is the crowd that forms quietly, the eyes that go somewhere else, the silence that functions as permission. He writes anyway, places the open notebook on the flat surface of his cart facing outward where anyone with functional eyesight can read it. I did not take them. You can check the camera footage from the supply room. I logged in at 10:47 p.m. and logged out at 10:49. I took nothing. I signed the access log. Check it. Daryl glances at it. The glance lasts less than 2 seconds. He does not read the whole thing. Tavian can tell by the position of his eyes that he skimmed the first line and stopped. We'll see, Daryl says, and he walks away. That is it. No apology pending. No acknowledgement of the cameras, the log, the 2 minutes of provable timeline that Tavian just put directly in front of him. Just the casual, practiced weight of a doubt left sitting on someone's chest with the expectation that the person underneath it will carry it quietly. The worker with the box braids drifts off. The one in the hoodie follows. Daryl rounds the corner. And Tavian is alone again with his cart and the hum of the building's HVAC system and the motion sensor lights that keep blinking on ahead of him and blinking off behind him. He finishes the 14th floor. He finishes the 13th and the 12th. He does it the way he always does it, completely and without error, because the only armor he has left in this world is the one thing no one can take without looking directly at him. His work, the gleaming surfaces, the emptied trash, the perfectly restocked restrooms, the floors that reflect the emergency lighting with enough clarity to see your own face if you look down at the right angle. He clocks out at 3:52 in the morning. The building's lobby is cold. The revolving door pushes him out into colder. The rain has started while he was inside. Not the soft kind. Not the kind that smells like earth and settles gently onto parked cars. The aggressive kind. The kind that comes in sideways off the harbor and finds every gap in your clothing like it was sent specifically to find you. He pulls his jacket tighter and checks his phone. His transit card is in his left pocket. His keys, the one for the building service entrance and the one for his basement room on Ferris Street with the bent tooth cut that you have to jiggle twice, are in his right. He checks them by feel without looking down, the way you check the things you cannot afford to lose. The 4 a.m. bus, the overnight route that runs through Sutton Yards and cuts along the lower bridge past Ferris Street, has been suspended. Flooding on the lower bridge. No estimated resumption time. He stands there in the overhang above the building's loading bay and stares at that notification for a long time. The rain hammers the pavement in front of him in sheets. A rideshare from here to Ferris Street costs $11 at this hour. More if the demand surge has kicked in. And it has probably kicked in because the bus is down and other people are stranded too. He has $7.40 in his account. He checked before he clocked out because he always checks before he clocks out, the way a person navigating a very narrow ledge checks their footing before each step. He could walk 4.5 miles in this rain after 6 hours of cleaning 30 floors of commercial office space, in shoes that have been resoled twice and needed again. He watches the street. Neon from a pharmacy sign across the road bleeds down through the rain in long red stripes. Cars pass. Private drivers. Late-night rideshares with their pink dashboard indicators glowing through fogged windows. Nobody slows. Nobody is looking for a damp Omega standing under a loading bay overhang at 4 in the morning. He shifts his duffel bag. Looks north along the block. Then south. That is when he sees it. Parked on the private access lane adjacent to the tower's east face. The lane with the chain across it normally. The chain someone has clearly removed for the vehicle's convenience. A black car. Not just black in the standard way cars are black. Black in the way that communicates something without saying it. Long and low and perfectly proportioned in the manner that belongs to vehicles built to move through cities without being questioned. The kind of car where the windows are tinted past seeing through. The kind where the silence radiating off the exterior is not an absence of sound but a presence of something denser. Money. Deliberate money. The chosen kind. Its engine is off. Its hazard lights are off. And the rear passenger door is open. Just barely. Not wide. Just enough that the interior light has come on. A faint amber warmth pressing out into the wet dark like a single lit window in a building full of empty offices. Tavian tells himself 5 minutes. That is the specific number he gives himself, and he means it when he says it. 5 minutes out of the rain. Time to warm his hands and figure out the walk home. The car is empty. He can see that clearly from 20 feet away. The driver's seat is dark. No one visible. The owner is presumably somewhere inside the Caldwell Monroe building for reasons that have nothing to do with a mute Omega cleaner who just got accused of stealing paper towels and has $7.40 to his name and 4.5 miles between him and his bed. He thinks briefly about what happens if someone sees him get in. He thinks about how it looks. And then he thinks about the rain coming in sideways and the knee that has been aching since August and the bus that is not coming. And the thinking stops being useful. He does not run to it. He walks, quickly and quietly, which is how he moves everywhere, and he opens the door only wide enough to slide inside and pulls it shut behind him with the careful pressure of someone who has learned to move through the world without adding to its noise. The warmth hits him first. That specific warmth. The kind that has been running for a while, built up inside a sealed space layered and full. Leather seats, dark upholstery, soft and expensive in the way that registers in the hands even before the eyes have adjusted. The faint, clean scent of cedar and something dry and precise underneath it. A leather briefcase on the floor, structured and heavy-looking. A neatly folded broadsheet newspaper on the seat beside him. No crease in it from reading, only from folding. A half-finished bottle of still water in the cup holder. Tavian exhales. Comes out longer than he expects. He presses his hands between his knees to warm them and watches the rain through the tinted window. From inside the glass, the street looks different. Quieter. Like watching a film of the city rather than being in it. The red pharmacy neon bleeds softer from here. The sound of the rain is muffled to a low percussion on the roof. 5 minutes. He is already counting. The sound comes from his left. Not from outside. From inside the car. Right here in the rear cabin with him. A slow, deliberate shift of weight. The soft resistance of a suit jacket against leather. Not a large movement. Just the movement of a person who has been sitting still for a long time and has decided to stop. Tavian turns his head. He is already there. He has been there this entire time. Sitting in the far rear corner of the seat, settled into a shadow that Tavian somehow, catastrophically, did not register when he slid inside. Tall even while seated. Dark suit with the kind of cut that does not announce itself but reveals itself in the way fabric behaves when a person moves. Dark hair. One hand resting with loose certainty on a closed phone in his lap. The other arm settled along the back of the seat with the particular ease of a man who occupies space not through effort but through nature. The face is the part that stops everything. Not dramatic in the way faces in movies are dramatic. Just precise. Controlled. A face that gives away nothing it has not chosen to give away. And the eyes. Silver. Not gray. Silver. Clear and still and absolutely focused on him with a quality that is not aggression and is not warmth. It is evaluation. Patient and exact. The kind that belongs to a man who processes information slowly because he is being thorough, not because he is slow. Tavian's hand finds the door handle. The man's voice when it comes is low. Not threatening. Completely calm. The calm of a person who does not raise his voice because he has never needed to. Stay where you are. Not a shout. Not a threat. Just a command delivered with the certainty of a man who has never once said something and watched it fail to happen. The engine starts. Not because Tavian heard anyone turn a key. Because somewhere up front, separated by a privacy partition Tavian registered as a fixed panel, a driver has been sitting this entire time. Unmoving and invisible. And has now started the car. It begins to move. Smooth and immediate and silent, pulling out of the private access lane and onto the street with the ease of a vehicle that knows exactly where it is going. Tavian's hand presses hard against the door handle. His notebook is already in his other hand, grabbed by reflex. He opens it, flips to a blank page, presses it across the space toward the man's line of sight. The man does not reach for it. He looks at Tavian's face, then at the notebook, then back at Tavian's face, like he is deciding which one will tell him more. He does not speak again, does not gesture for the notebook or wave it away. He simply settles into his corner of the seat and looks at the Omega across from him with the expression of a man who has just encountered something he did not expect, and is treating that fact as the most interesting thing that has happened all week. Not angry, not afraid, something closer to curious. The car drives through Greyhaven Harbor in the rain. The buildings slide past the dark windows. And the narrator watches all of it and understands, from this position, something that Tavian does not have the luxury of understanding yet. The man sitting across from him is Cedric Vailcrest, 41, owner and principal of Vailcrest Maritime Group, which handles cargo logistics for 11 of the 14 largest shipping terminals on the eastern seaboard. A man described in 3 recent business publications as methodical, demanding, and unusually private for someone who controls the movement of that much commercial freight. A man who has never once been caught in a public dispute. Never once been the subject of a lawsuit that made it to court. Never once made a statement he later had to walk back. A man who controls the quiet half of Greyhaven's economy. And who is currently looking at a mute Omega cleaning worker who climbed into his car for warmth. Not with anger, with patience. The car moves. The city passes. And Tavian Quill sits across from Cedric Vailcrest and does not know whether he has just made the last mistake of his careful, quiet life, or stumbled, entirely by accident, into the first shelter he has found in 7 months. Chapter 2. The Omega who wrote one word and changed everything. Nobody asks for the pen first. That is the thing the narrator keeps coming back to later, when everything that follows this night has come to its conclusion and the distance makes careful analysis possible. The Alpha does not demand, does not threaten, does not reach for a phone to call building security or city police. He reaches into the breast pocket of his dark suit jacket, produces a pen, slender and matte-finished, the kind that costs more than Tavian's weekly grocery budget without announcing that fact. Then he reaches forward and draws a leather-bound notebook from the inner pocket of the door beside him, sets it on the armrest between them the way a man sets a document on a table in a meeting where he intends to be the reasonable one, slides them toward Tavian, leans back into his corner, and waits. The car moves through Greyhaven Harbor with that particular smooth authority that belongs to vehicles designed for people who cannot afford to be jolted. Rain hammers the roof in irregular percussion. The wipers work at a steady, unhurried pace. Somewhere beyond the privacy partition, the driver navigates without asking for direction. The interior of the car is amberlit and sealed and very, very quiet. Tavian stares at the notebook. He stares at it the way a person stares at a door that might lead somewhere or might lead nowhere at all. The leather is dark brown, almost black. The pen is uncapped. The blank page is open. Cedric watches him stare at it. He does not rush. He does not add words to the silence to fill it or shape it or push it in a particular direction. He simply maintains it, the way a man maintains silence when he has learned that silence, applied correctly, is a more precise instrument than most questions. Tavian picks up the pen. His hand is not fully steady. He hopes the dim light hides it. He opens the notebook to the first blank page. Writes one word. Cold. He turns the notebook so the word faces the Alpha and sets it on the armrest between them. The silence that follows is not empty. It has texture. Cedric looks at the word. Just the one word. He looks at it the way he looked at Tavian's face when the door first opened, with that quality of attention that takes things in without immediately reacting to them. Then he looks at Tavian, then back down at the word. Something shifts, barely, the way the light in a room shifts when a cloud moves over the sun outside. You almost miss it, but it changes everything in the room by 1 degree. He picks up the notebook, holds it, reads the word again. Most people in this situation produce a performance. They hedge. They apologize. They fill the space between themselves and danger with a carefully constructed version of themselves designed to appeal to whoever holds the power. I didn't mean to bother anyone. I thought it was empty. I'm so sorry. Please. Each phrase calibrated to manage the situation rather than describe it. This Omega wrote the true thing. The only thing. Cold. No apology attached. No strategy underneath it. Just the single, unadorned fact of why a person climbs into a stranger's car at 4 in the morning in February in the rain. And that one word does something to Cedric Veilcrest that no legal argument, no negotiation tactic, no corporate adversary has accomplished in a very long time. It slows him down. He sets the notebook back on the armrest. Now he is looking properly. He has been observing since the moment the door opened, but there is a difference between observing and actually looking, between cataloging surface details and letting those details form into something coherent. He lets himself do it now. The shoes. Black, work standard, with a non-slip sole rating that matches what you need on commercial hard floors. Worn evenly across the ball of the foot in the specific pattern that develops from standing in one place for extended periods. The kind of wear pattern that belongs to someone moving between rooms on the same floor all night, every night. The jacket. Inexpensive but functional. A small logo on the chest pocket. A building services company logo, the kind that appears on subcontracted cleaning crew uniforms, not on building management or security. The logo is faded at the edges. This jacket has been washed many times. The hands. Resting now in his lap, slightly damp still from the rain that has worked through his jacket, and trembling in the small controlled way that means the person is aware of the trembling and is actively trying to stop it. Not shock trembling, cold trembling, the kind that tells you about a body that has been outside in wet cold without adequate protection. The spiral notebook clipped to the front pocket of the vest. His own notebook, separate from the one Cedric offered, with a pen attached by a rubber band. the scar. It runs across the base of the throat with the directness of something old. Not recent. Not the kind that is still raw and uncertain about what it will eventually be. The kind that has been there long enough to have settled into the skin completely. Long enough to have become part of the permanent geography of a person's face. Pale against the warm brown of his throat. Mute, and something else. Cedric's gaze moves precisely once to the wrist visible below the shifted sleeve. Only once. He does not linger. Does not let his eyes communicate that he has seen it. Because he knows, with the specific knowledge of a man who has encountered concealment many times in many contexts, that naming what is hidden sometimes closes the door on the conversation before it begins. The bruise is old. Weeks. Moving through that greenish-yellow resolution phase that means the body has been healing it long enough to have stopped treating it as an emergency. This is not an isolated injury. The placement, the age, the careful way the sleeve has been positioned to minimize its visibility. These are details that belong to a person who has learned to incorporate evidence of harm into the ordinary management of their appearance. This is someone who has been hurt before. Not once. Enough times to have developed a system. Cedric does not react. He is a man who has spent 2 decades choosing, precisely and deliberately, where and how and to whom he reacts. His reactions are resources. He does not spend them carelessly. He notes the bruise the same way he noted the shoes and the notebook and the scar. Adds it to the calculation. He picks up the leather notebook. Writes. Turns it toward Tavian. What is your name? Tavian stares at it. There is a moment where his jaw tightens slightly. Then he reaches for his own notebook, the one clipped to his vest, and writes in it. Turns it across the space. Tavian. Cedric writes again. Where were you going? Tavian writes without hesitating this time. Home. The overnight bus stopped running. Flooding on the lower bridge. I was only going to sit inside for 5 minutes. The Alpha reads this. Sets the notebook on the seat beside him. Looks out the window at the rain-blurred city for a moment. The buildings on this stretch of Deacon Avenue slide past in dark plains of glass and concrete. Then he looks back at Tavian and writes. Are you afraid of me? Tavian reads it. He reads it twice. It is the most direct question anyone has asked him in a long time. Not a question with an assumed answer built into it. Not a question designed to produce a specific response that benefits the asker. Just a clear and genuine inquiry from a man sitting across a darkened car in the rain who wants to know what the person across from him actually feels. Tavian thinks about writing no. No is the word you reach for when you are trying to survive an interaction with someone who has all the structural power and you have none. No keeps the temperature down. No says I am not a threat, so please don't make me one. No has gotten Tavian through 100 situations where yes would have escalated everything in the wrong direction. But something about this man, something about the precision with which he asks the question and then waits, without filling the pause with pressure, makes the practiced answer feel wrong in a way Tavian cannot fully articulate even inside his own head. He writes, I don't know yet. He turns it toward the Alpha. Cedric reads it. Something moves across his face. Slow and warm in a way that is not quite warmth yet, but is the direction warmth moves from. The kind of expression a person makes when they are given something they did not expect and find that it is, unexpectedly, the right thing. Not a smile. Nothing so simple as that. Something closer to recognition. He tells the driver to pull over. The car eases to the curb on a quiet block. Merchant Row. Rain falls straight down here, sheltered from the harbor wind by the buildings on either side. Cedric gestures toward the door. No words. No conditions stated. No lecture on the consequences of entering private vehicles without permission. Just the gesture. Clean and simple. The door is unlocked. You can go. Tavian reaches for the handle. The headlights come across the intersection before he touches it. 2 of them, wide apart, set high on a vehicle body built wide and heavy. Black SUVs, both of them, coming east on Merchant Row. They move at the pace of vehicles that are not in a hurry because they do not need to be. And at the intersection where Merchant Row meets Calder Street, they slow. They stop. Engines running. Not because of a signal. The signal is green. They stop because they have found what they were looking for and are now deciding at what pace to proceed. They are not looking at the car. They are looking at the space in front of the car. At the spot on the wet sidewalk where a person might step out of a rear passenger door. Tavian's hand stops moving. His fingers are on the door handle, but they do not pull. His body has already processed the information before his mind finishes organizing it. 7 months of being followed develops a particular kind of sense. A reading of vehicles that is less visual and more instinctive. He knows the SUVs the way you know a specific sound in a building you've lived in long enough. Not from the sound itself, but from what the sound means. He does not open the door. Cedric has not looked at the SUVs. He has been watching Tavian's face. He sees the exact moment it changes. The specific stillness that replaces the ordinary stillness of a person sitting. He tracks it without asking about it. Then he turns his head, takes in the two vehicles at the intersection, takes in their position, the blocking angle, the idling engines that mean they are ready to move and have decided to wait, the tinting that puts their windshields past the legal limit in this state. He takes in all of it with the same quality of attention he brought to Tavian's shoes and bruises and the word cold written in a leather notebook. He looks back at Tavian, takes in the hand that is still technically on the door handle but is pressing inward instead of pulling. He picks up the pen, writes 2 words, "Get back in." Tavian reads them. His hand remains on the door handle for 3 seconds. He is running the calculation that a person runs when they have spent 7 months making survival calculations and has developed a particular relationship with the variables. The SUVs at the intersection know his face. They know his route. They know that the bus is down and he would need to walk, and they have positioned themselves on the most direct walking route from this point to the lower bridge. They have been doing this kind of positioning for months. They are patient. They are organized. And they already know where he lives. He pulls his hand back from the door, slides into the center of the seat, pulls the door closed. Cedric taps the partition with 2 knuckles. A specific pattern. Short, long, short. The driver pulls out from the curb without a word, without sudden acceleration, without the kind of urgency that communicates panic. They ease onto Calder Street and the route shifts. The car is quiet. 2 minutes pass. The city changes around them. They move through the warehouse district near Portside, mostly dark at this hour, loading docks locked and the freight lifts still. Then the driver's voice comes through the partition. Low and even. "Sir, they are still behind us." Cedric does not look back, does not turn his head. His posture does not change. "Yes." A pause. For seconds. "I noticed." Tavian sits with those 2 words in the amberlit interior of the moving car. The rain falls, the city passes, and those 2 words do something to the space between him and the man across from him. Something structural. "I noticed." Cedric was already watching. Before he told Tavian to get back in, before Tavian's hand was on the door handle, before Tavian had even processed what the SUVs meant. Cedric had already seen them, already understood them, already decided what to do about it. Get back in was not a reflex. It was a choice, made with full knowledge of what was following them down Merchant Row. And that is an enormous thing to sit with in a moving car in the rain. The car continues through Portside, makes a turn that is not direct. Then another. The driver is running evasion in the most professional possible way, which is to say it does not look like evasion at all. It looks like a private car taking an indirect route through a city at 4:30 in the morning. Nothing to flag. Nothing to chase. Cedric has been looking out the window. He looks back at Tavian now and holds the eye contact for a moment in the way that precedes something important. Then he picks up the leather notebook. The pen moves. Not fast. Deliberately. He turns the page. For words. "Who is hunting you?" Tavian reads it. He reads it and then he looks at the man who wrote it and he understands fully and clearly that this is the question everything downstream of this night depends on. 7 months of different addresses and night shift positions and carefully maintained invisibility have all been organized around never answering this question to anyone. Not to the woman at the boarding house on Pelham who asked too many questions and then stopped asking in a way that told him someone had spoken to her. Not to the social services intake worker who saw the scar and the wariness and tried to draw him out with the specific gentleness trained people use on frightened omegas. Not to the one person he used to call a friend, before the night at the terminal, before he understood the scope of what he had seen. He has told no one, because no one he could have told would have had any power to do anything about it. Because the people hunting him are not individuals with grudges. They are part of a structure, an organized, well-funded, professionally managed structure that disguises itself as logistics and moves Omega workers across state lines the way cargo is moved. Paperwork, shipping manifests, transport contracts with enough legitimate cover on the surface to deflect casual inspection. They have lawyers. They have security. They have relationships with people in positions that are supposed to be on the opposite side. And Tavian has a spiral notebook and $7.40. He looks at Cedric Vailcrest across the dim space of the car's rear cabin. He thinks about the SUVs. He thinks about the decision to say get back in. He thinks about the quality of attention this man has been directing at him since the moment the door opened. The kind of attention that sees things, that registered the bruise and the scar and the worn shoes and the word cold without making any of them into a performance or a reaction. He thinks about what it costs to trust someone. And he thinks about what it costs, what it has been costing him for 7 months, to not trust anyone at all. He picks up his pen. He opens his own notebook. And he begins to write. Not a sentence. Not two. More. He writes about the warehouse subcontractor company with the name that sounds like a logistics firm because it is technically a logistics firm. He writes about the transport routes. He writes about the specific terminal where he worked for 11 weeks before he saw something he was not supposed to see. A child. An Omega child. Taken off a truck manifested as a standard dry goods shipment and handed to 2 men Tavian had seen at the terminal before. Men who were treated by the foreman with the specific deference reserved for people who belong to a structure above your own. He writes about the files he accessed from the terminal's internal network before he ran. The records. The real manifests, not the surface ones. Names, dates, route numbers, transfer points. He writes about why he ran that night and has not stopped moving since. He writes until the page is full and goes to the next one and writes until that one is nearly full too. Then he stops, turns the notebook towards Cedric, and watches. He watches the silver eyes move across the first line. Then the second. The pace is steady, not rushing, not skimming, reading everything the way a person reads something they understand they may need to act on. He reads to the bottom of the first page and turns to the second without looking up. He finishes the second page. He sets the notebook down, and he goes very still. Not the deliberate stillness of his usual composure. A different quality of still. The kind that happens when the mind is processing something large and the body defaults to quiet to give it the space to work. He looks out the window for a long moment. Outside, the warehouse district has given way to the edge of the harbor commercial zone. Shipping infrastructure visible even at night, the silhouettes of cranes and container stacks against the low-lit sky, the faint navigation lights on water visible through the far window. Greyhaven Harbor, one of the busiest ports on the eastern seaboard. Cedric looks at it. He is seeing something different in it than he was seeing an hour ago. Tavian can see that much. The expression on his face has not become dramatic. It has not cracked into visible emotion. But its quality has changed in the specific way that means the information received has changed the landscape of everything visible. Cedric picks up his phone. Not the notebook now. The phone. He holds it for a moment, then dials. It rings twice. A voice answers. Alert despite the hour. Cedric says 3 words. Shut down Terminal 9. A pause on the other end. Then the voice, controlled but clearly recalibrating. That terminal moves 40% of the Eastern Corridor volume. If we shut it tonight without a maintenance flag, the Port Authority will shut it down. The call ends. He puts the phone in his jacket pocket. He does not look at Tavian. Not yet. He looks forward for another moment, with the expression of a man walking through the implications of a decision he has already made and is simply mapping the terrain ahead of it. Then he looks at Tavian. His voice, when he speaks, is low. "Where are the files?" Tavian has been watching all of this. The phone call, the 3 words, the immediate, decisive certainty. The way a man who controls billions of dollars of freight movement says shut it down the same way another person would say turn off the light. He looks at this man for a long moment. Then he picks up his pen. He writes the answer. Not an address in a bank or a storage locker. Not a safety deposit box or a legal office or a cloud account with a password only he knows. Something much simpler than any of that. Much smaller. Much more ordinary. He writes the address of his basement apartment on Ferris Street. Writes the specific location inside it. Turns the notebook toward the alpha. And watches Cedric Veilcrest read it. Watches the silver eyes move through it. Watches them go still. Because what Tavian has written is not a vault or a server or any kind of secure facility. What Tavian has written is a kitchen. And in that kitchen, a single ceramic mug on a shelf above the sink. And inside that mug, folded and sealed in waterproof plastic, a USB drive and 32 printed pages of transit manifests, transfer records, and names. The only copy of the evidence that could bring the entire operation down. Sitting in a basement apartment on Ferris Street. With no lock worth mentioning on the door. And Cedric understands, with the specific precision of a man who has spent 20 years thinking about what happens when a critical shipment is exposed to the wrong conditions, exactly how fragile that situation is. He looks at Tavian. And for the first time since the door closed and the car started moving and 2 silver eyes opened in a shadow that changed everything, he says something that is not a command and not a question. It is something quieter than both of those things. How long have you been carrying this alone? Tavian stares at him. 7 months. 7 months of boarding houses and night shifts and never sitting with his back to a door. 7 months of counting coins for bus fare and planning routes around shipping terminals and waking up in the dark from a sound that turned out to be nothing. 7 months of knowing exactly what was inside that ceramic mug and knowing, every single day, that the wrong person finding it before the right person did would end everything. He does not write the answer. He does not need to, because Cedric Veilcrest looks at his face and reads it there. And something changes in the car after that. Not dramatically. Not loudly. The rain still falls. The driver still navigates. The headlights behind them maintain their professional distance on the empty street. But the temperature of the silence between them shifts. By 1 degree, then 2. If you were Tavian right now, 7 months of running, a man who just shut down a 40% cargo terminal without blinking, and a ceramic mug on a kitchen shelf holding the only thing standing between the truth and the people trying to bury it, what would you do next? Tell me in the comments. Because the next chapter goes somewhere none of us are fully ready for. Chapter 3. The weight of paperwork and the men who never see the victims. The car doesn't stop moving. That matters. Because Cedric Veilcrest has just heard something that should have made any reasonable person pull over, step out, and call the nearest authority they trusted. Instead, he sits in the back of a moving vehicle at 4:43 in the morning, with 2 SUVs maintaining professional distance 2 blocks behind them, and he is completely still. Thinking. The kind of thinking that doesn't look like anything from the outside. No visible calculation. No pen tapping. No eyes moving to the ceiling the way people's eyes move when they are sorting through something complicated. Just stillness. The specific stillness of a man whose mind is moving very fast in a direction his face has decided not to announce. Tavian watches him. He has just handed over 7 months of survival. Every careful secret. Every route he memorized and then abandoned. Every night he woke up in a strange room listening to sounds that turned out to be nothing, and the 2 or 3 times they turned out to be something. He has given all of that to a man he met 40 minutes ago in a car he entered without permission. And he does not know what happens next. That is not a new feeling for Tavian. Not knowing what happens next is basically the infrastructure of his life. But this version of it is different. This version has weight. Because for the first time in 7 months, what happens next is not entirely in his own hands. Cedric picks up his phone again. He doesn't dial immediately. He looks at the screen for a moment the way a chess player looks at a board before moving a piece they have already decided to move, not to decide but to confirm. Then he dials. 2 rings. A voice answers. Male. Alert. The kind of alert that says this person was not asleep and was expecting to be called. Pull the transit manifests for Terminal 9. Everything filed in the last 14 months. Cross-reference against the Harlow Meridian subcontract. I want the discrepancies between the filed weight and the actual load records. A pause on the other end. Tonight. Now. The call ends. Cedric sets the phone down. Looks at Tavian. His expression has not changed. But something behind it has. Something has moved into position the way a door moves into position before it is opened. Present. Ready. Not yet activated. The routes you described, he says. Tavian looks at him. Walk me through them again. He slides the leather notebook back across the armrest. And this is the part the narrator needs to slow down for. Because what happens next is not a dramatic confrontation. Not an action sequence. It is something that looks, from the outside, like 2 people passing a notebook back and forth in a moving car. But what it actually is an accounting. Tavian writes. He writes about the Harlow Meridian Logistics subcontract. It operated out of a warehouse complex in the Eastport district of Greyhaven Harbor. On paper, it was a legitimate dry goods transport operation. It moved packaged food products, commercial cleaning supplies, industrial materials. It had insurance documentation, a clean operating license, 3 years of filed tax records. Everything a port authority inspector would want to see if they stopped long enough to look. They rarely stopped long enough to look. He writes about the secondary manifests, the ones that did not go into the official filing system, the ones maintained on a separate internal server that most warehouse workers had no access to, and that Tavian accessed only because he spent 11 weeks quietly, invisibly, learning the geometry of that building the same way he learned every building he ever worked in. Which rooms held which conversations. Which server terminals were left logged in during shift changes. Which supervisors took their full lunch break and which ones came back early. He writes what those manifests contained. Names. Not cargo names. Person names. Omega designations. Age notations. The kind of shorthand that belongs to a system that has processed enough human beings to develop efficient abbreviations for them. He writes about the routes. 3 primary corridors moving north out of Greyhaven Harbor, cutting through 4 state lines, terminating at points the official records listed as cold storage facilities, and that Tavian, from 11 weeks of watching the secondary manifests, understood were something else entirely. He writes about the night he saw the child. This part he writes slowly. A small omega, young enough that the age notation in the secondary manifest used a number Tavian had to read twice before he believed it. Taken off a truck filed as carrying restaurant supply equipment. Handed to 2 men in a loading bay on the north side of the complex at 2:30 in the morning. In the rain, while the shift supervisor watched from the doorway. Said nothing. Went back inside. Tavian had been in the rafters of that loading bay. Cleaning a ventilation access panel. Invisible the way he was always invisible. He watched the whole thing. And then he went back to the server terminal. Downloaded everything he could access onto a USB drive he had bought 3 weeks earlier at a drugstore 2 miles from the complex, because some part of him had understood, even before he saw the child, that the day was coming when he would need it. He writes all of this, turns the notebook towards Cedric, and waits while the silver eyes move through it line by line. Cedric reads slowly, not processing for headlines. Reading the way a man reads a document he knows he will be responsible for acting on. His face stays controlled. But there is a moment around the second page where his jaw tightens, just slightly, just once. He finishes, sets the notebook down. He is quiet for 30 seconds. 40. The car moves through the dark of portside. Outside the window, harbor cranes rise against the low sky like the skeletons of enormous animals. Then Cedric speaks. His voice is carefully even in the way that means the evenness is being maintained by effort. How many routes did you identify? Tavian holds up 3 fingers. And the northern terminus. The cold storage listings. Tavian opens his notebook, writes 2 facility names. Cedric looks at them, and here is where the narrator has to stop. Because Cedric Veilcrest looks at those 2 facility names and something happens in his eyes that is not calculation and is not surprise. It is recognition. Not the kind that means he already knew about the trafficking operation. Not that. But the kind that means the names on that page connect to something in his own professional knowledge. Something in the geography of the Eastern Corridor Freight Network he has spent 20 years operating inside. He knows those facilities, not because he uses them directly, because they appear in the broader network of connected logistics contracts that any operator of his scale would encounter when managing relationships across a major port region. They are listed in his system as third-party cold storage vendors that service carriers whose freight passes through terminals in his network. They are connected, distantly, through layers of subcontract and intermediary operation. But connected. To him, he sits with that. The narrator sits with it too. Because this is the specific kind of moment that does not make noise when it arrives. It arrives in a car at 5 in the morning in the rain. It arrives in the form of 2 facility names written in a spiral notebook by a mute omega who climbed into a stranger's car to get warm. It arrives without a speech or a confrontation or a moment designed for any audience. It just arrives. And Cedric Veilcrest, a man who has spent 20 years building a legitimate empire with precision and deliberate ethics, understands in this moment that precision and deliberate ethics are not the same as knowing everything your network touches. This is the part worth pausing on. Evil sometimes is not loud. It does not announce itself. It is paperwork. It is a subcontract filed on a Tuesday afternoon by a mid-level operations manager who did not look closely enough at the vendor's secondary business. It is a logistics chain that passes through 12 hands between the point of harm and the point where a man like Cedric would ever have reason to look at it directly. It is distance, deliberate distance, maintained so that the people signing contracts at the top never have to see what is moving through the system at the bottom. Cedric picks up his phone. He dials. Same voice from before. The Harlow Meridian subcontract. What carriers in our network use their cold storage terminus listings on the Northern Corridor? Typing sounds on the other end. A pause. Looks like 3. 2 of them are quarterly rotation vendors. The third is a direct link carrier on the Eastport freight schedule. Flag all 3. No movement on any freight connected to those listings until I clear it personally. That's going to affect the Tuesday morning. Flag them. He ends the call. He makes one more. 3 words. Shut down Terminal 9. His assistant's voice comes back tight. Sir, that terminal moves 40% of the Eastern Corridor volume. If we pull the operating authorization tonight without a maintenance flag, the Port Authority is going to require an incident report within. Shut it down. Call ends. The car is quiet. Tavian stares at him. He stares at a man who just, in the span of 4 minutes, halted a significant portion of his own operations capacity because a spiral notebook in a car told him something was wrong inside his network. No committee, no consultation, no waiting for morning and a proper meeting and a legal review. Just stopped it. The way you stop something when the stopping matters more than the cost. Cedric looks at Tavian's expression. Reads it accurately. I should have been looking more carefully, he says. That is all he says. The narrator wants to stay on that line for a moment, because it is not a performance. It is not a speech designed to position himself as one of the good ones. It is a man sitting in a car at 5 in the morning acknowledging simply and directly that his attention was not where it needed to be, and that the person sitting across from him with worn shoes and a broken voice and 7 months of running behind him saw something that he did not. That matters. The driver's voice comes through the partition, quieter than before. Sir, they're no longer behind us. Cedric does not react with relief. His eyes move to Tavian's face first, because losing the tail does not mean the problem is solved. It means the tail decided to stop following. And a tail that stops following a moving car at 5 in the morning does not stop because it lost interest. It stops because it already knows where the destination is. Cedric's voice stays even. Take us to Ferris Street. Tavian's head comes up fast. Cedric is already looking at him. The files. One word. That is all it takes. And the entire weight of the last 7 months shifts in Tavian's chest, because the ceramic mug on the shelf above his kitchen sink has been the one fixed point of everything. The one thing he protected above all else. The one thing that made every cold night in a boarding house and every risk and every morning of waking up and checking that the bag was still there worth the cost. And now they are heading directly toward it. In a car that was followed 20 minutes ago. By people who already know his address. Cedric speaks again before Tavian can reach for his notebook. My security team is already moving. He says it the way he says everything. Without drama. Without reassurance performed for an audience. Just the fact. Stated clearly. Like a man who made a phone call while Tavian was writing the second page of his account. A call so brief and quiet that Tavian registered it as background and let it pass. And that call was not about manifests or carrier flags. That call was about Ferris Street. Tavian stares at him. Cedric holds the look. You've been carrying evidence of a federal-level trafficking operation in a ceramic mug for 7 months, he says. A pause. We're going to get it. The car moves through the last stretch of the harbor district. Rain on the windows. The cranes in the dark. The faint lights of the port infrastructure against the low sky. And Tavian Quill sits in the back of a moving vehicle heading toward the only place he has ever kept anything that felt like home, with a man he met less than an hour ago, and feels something he has not allowed himself to feel in a very long time. Not safe. Not yet. But close to the direction safe comes from. That feeling lasts exactly until the driver turns onto the block. And the lights of 3 vehicles parked outside Tavian's building come into view. They are already there. They got there first. The narrator wants to say something reassuring here. But the narrator also believes you deserve the truth. Those 3 vehicles are parked with the engines running. 2 men are visible near the entrance to the building. One of them is looking directly at the car that just turned onto the block. And the way he is looking at it says he has been watching for it. They are not there to negotiate. They are not there to ask questions. They came for what is inside that ceramic mug. And they have no intention of leaving without it. If that knot in your chest is real right now, good. That means this story is doing exactly what it is supposed to do. Subscribe to this channel and turn on your notifications. Because what happens in that building in the next 10 minutes is the chapter that determines whether everything Tavian carried for 7 months was enough. Do not miss it. Chapter 4. What safe feels like. The car does not slow down. That is the first thing Tavian registers. 3 vehicles outside his building. Engines running. 2 men visible near the entrance. And the driver does not brake. Does not hesitate. Just maintains speed and rolls past the block like a car running a completely ordinary route at 5 in the morning. Cedric is already on his phone. He does not speak loudly. He does not need to. Same low register he has used all night. He gives a street name, a vehicle count, 2 entry point descriptions that tell Tavian, with uncomfortable clarity, that the person receiving this information is already on this block. Already watching the same 3 vehicles. Already in position in a way that had to have been coordinated before the car ever turned onto Ferris Street. He planned for this. Not just the phone call about manifests. Not just the terminal shutdown. He planned for the possibility that moving toward Ferris Street would mean moving toward people who were already there, and he made arrangements for that possibility without announcing that he was making them. The call ends. Tavian reaches for his notebook. Writes fast. They may already be inside. The lock on my door takes 30 seconds if you know what you are doing. Cedric reads it. Looks up. The mug. Tavian nods. Shelf above the sink. Another nod. Cedric types something into his phone. Does not dial this time. Sends it as a message. Then sets the phone face down on his knee and looks out the window at the rain-soaked street with the expression of a man watching a sequence of events unfold against a map he has already memorized. The narrator wants to describe what happens next accurately, which means describing it the way it actually happens. Not the way it happens in stories designed for maximum visible drama. There is no chase. There is no confrontation in a hallway. No broken furniture. No moment where Cedric faces down the men at the door with something to prove. The things that happen in the next 11 minutes happen quietly. They happen in the dark on a residential block in Greyhaven Harbor, while most of the people in the surrounding apartments sleep through all of it without ever knowing there was anything to sleep through. 2 of the 3 vehicles outside Tavian's building are boxed before the third vehicle's occupants understand what is happening. A team of 4 people, none of whom Tavian will ever fully see, not tonight and not afterward, manages the situation with the specific professional economy of people who have done this kind of work before and understand that efficiency is more effective than drama. No spectacle, just a problem. Closed. Tavian sits in the back of the car on the parallel block, engine running, wipers working at their steady pace. Cedric sits beside him in focused quiet, receiving information through the phone held loosely in one hand and processing it in real time. Every 30 seconds or so he responds, once with a street number, once with the word clear, spoken as both acknowledgement and instruction, once with nothing at all, just a small, deliberate nod that functions as a complete sentence. 11 minutes. Then the driver's voice through the partition. Calm. Certain. We're clear, sir. Cedric looks at Tavian. Your door is intact. The mug is where you left it. Tavian looks at him for a long moment. He looks at this man who 3 hours ago was a stranger in a shadow, who said stay where you are with the certainty of someone who had not yet decided what to do with the thing that had just climbed into his car but had decided, at minimum, that sending it back into the rain was not the answer, who read one word cold and slowed down, who noticed the bruise without naming it, who shut down 40% of his own corridor capacity in the middle of the night because a notebook told him something was wrong, who made a phone call Tavian did not fully register and sent people to Ferris Street ahead of the men who were already on their way. Tavian does not write anything. He just looks. And Cedric, for the first time all night, looks back with something that is not calculation and is not management and has no professional application. Just a man looking at another man. And seeing him properly. The arrests happen over the following 72 hours. For that first night. 2 more as the information from the USB drive moves through the appropriate channels and reaches the federal investigators who have been building a case around the Eastern Corridor operation for 16 months, without the specific documentation needed to move on it. The USB drive and 32 pages of printed manifests are that documentation. Terminal 9 is the thread that unravels the rest. Over the following 6 weeks, the network collapses the way organized, document-dependent criminal structures collapse when their records surface. Not loudly, not all at once, piece by piece. The manifests connect to the carriers. The carriers connect to the facilities. The facilities connect to the men who ran them. And the men who ran them connect upward through the structure to the people at the top who signed contracts on Tuesday afternoons without looking closely enough at what they were authorizing. Some of those people are surprised to find themselves connected. Some are not. The narrator does not spend time on the ones who are not. Tavian does not attend any of the proceedings. He is offered a seat in several rooms and declines each time through the lawyer. A woman named Adrian Caldwell who operates with a quiet efficiency that matches everything else in Cedric's world, and who communicates with Tavian through written correspondence without ever once making that accommodation feel like a special arrangement. She handles it as a standard operating preference and moves on. That matters too. What Tavian does instead is keep his apartment on Ferris Street. He knows that might seem like a small thing. After everything. After 7 months of running and the night in the car and the ceramic mug and the 11 minutes on the parallel block while people he never saw cleared his building of a threat he had been carrying alone since before the summer. But the apartment is his. The mug is his. The shelf above the kitchen sink. The one he put up himself with a drill borrowed from the unit upstairs and 3 wall anchors he tested 3 times before he trusted them, is his. Staying is its own kind of statement. He goes back to work. Not at the Caldwell Monroe Tower. A different contract now, through a placement agency that Adrian connected him with. A smaller building in a better-lit district. The overnight supervisor is a woman named Bert Rice Okafor, who has worked building services for 19 years, and communicates with Tavian exclusively through a whiteboard she keeps mounted near the supply room. Because, As she told him on his first day, she has a brother who is hard of hearing and she is not interested in making anyone's communication harder than it needs to be. Bert Rice is not a major character in this story, but she matters. She matters the way most of the people who make a life livable matter. Without fanfare, without a named role, without knowing that the simple act of hanging a whiteboard near a supply room is the kind of thing a person might carry with them quietly for the rest of their life. Some weeks pass. The lawyer stops needing to call as often. The federal case moves into the phase where the people most directly responsible for what happened in that loading bay at 2:30 in the morning are sitting in rooms Tavian does not need to enter. The Port Authority completes its incident review of Terminal 9's operational suspension. The 3 cold storage facilities on the northern corridor are flagged for inspection by the relevant state agencies. The carriers who used them without sufficient scrutiny are issued notices that will cost their operations money and sustained attention for the next 2 years minimum. None of it is fast. None of it arrives with visible resolution. It is paperwork, the responding kind. The kind that follows the paperwork that enabled the harm and works to undo, slowly and imperfectly, what that paperwork allowed. Tavian walks home from his shift one evening in early spring. The route is the same it has always been. Ferris Street runs where it has always run. But the quality of the walk is different. He is not counting exits, not tracking vehicles at intersections, not rehearsing in the back of his mind the sequence of actions that would be required if the sound around the next corner turned out to be something rather than nothing. He is just walking home. There is a knock at his door. He still reacts to knocks the way he has reacted to them for the better part of a year. The same momentary stillness. The same quick read, wait of the knock interval, whether it was preceded by footsteps he tracked or footsteps that arrived without warning. The body remembers what the mind is trying to put down. But the stillness lasts only a moment, because he already knows who it is. 3 days earlier the lawyer sent a brief message. Factual and direct in her standard style. Nothing ceremonial about it. Just information, delivered the same way she delivered all information. A visit. An evening in early spring. No agenda stated. He opens the door. Cedric is standing in the hallway in a jacket that costs more than the building's monthly utility bill, holding 2 cups of coffee in paper sleeves from the place on the corner that Tavian passes every single morning. He is not in a suit. Dark jacket, dark pants, no tie. Dressed for the place rather than for an impression. He holds out one of the cups. Tavian takes it. They do not shake hands. They do not perform any of the formal gestures that belong to occasions designed to be remembered as occasions. Cedric steps inside when Tavian steps back from the door. He looks at the apartment the way a person looks at a place they have heard described and are now seeing in reality, not with judgment, not with assessment, just with the basic human interest in how a place a person told you about actually compares to the version you held in your head. His gaze moves to the shelf above the sink. The ceramic mug is there. Blue-gray glaze. A small chip on the rim that was there when Tavian bought it from a sidewalk sale 2 years ago. It holds 2 tea bags and a pen that rolled into it from the counter. The USB drive is with the federal case file. The 32 pages are in a sealed document envelope in Adrian Caldwell's office. The mug is just a mug now. But Cedric looks at it the way you look at something that stood for more than its material for long enough that the looking still carries weight. He sits down at Tavian's kitchen table. Tavian sits across from him. The coffee is hot. Outside the window, early spring rain moves through the dark in the soft kind. Not the aggressive February kind. Not the kind that finds every gap and pushes through. The gentle kind. The kind that sounds like company through a window rather than a threat. They sit. Cedric does not fill the silence with business. Does not explain the visit beyond its plain fact. Does not offer a prepared account of what the last 3 months have meant or what the case has accomplished or what comes next in any formal capacity. He just sits at Tavian's kitchen table and drinks his coffee and lets the silence be what it is. Which is, and the narrator can tell you this from this position, the specific silence of 2 people who have been through something together, who have arrived separately and through different routes, at a place where the something is over. And what remains is just the 2 of them and a table and the rain outside and 2 cups of coffee from the corner. At some point Cedric gets up. He does not announce it. He walks to the wall shelf near the window. The one that has been pulling slightly from its bracket for weeks, the one Tavian wrote on his to-do list and has not yet gotten to because his to-do list has been longer than his energy for most of the winter. Cedric finds the loose screw by running a finger along the bracket. The way a person finds something by feel when they already know what they are looking for. He takes a folding multi-tool from his jacket pocket. Matte finish, the kind of object that belongs to a person who was taught to carry one rather than to a person who carries it for show, and tightens the bracket. Returns. Done. Sits back down. Does not say anything about it. Tavian looks at the shelf. Then at him. Cedric picks up his coffee. The narrator wants to stay here for a moment. In this kitchen. On this evening. With the rain outside the window and the fixed bracket on the wall and the ceramic mug above the sink that once held the only thing standing between the truth and the people trying to bury it. Because safety, the real kind, does not arrive with a declaration. It does not come with paperwork or a formal confirmation or a moment where someone stands in front of you and tells you that you are allowed to stop running now. It arrives in small moments where nothing bad happens. In a knock at the door that is exactly what it is. In a shelf bracket tightened without a reason given. In coffee from the corner place and rain through a window and another person sitting at your table who is not there to take anything or ask for anything or need something from you that you are not already prepared to give. Safety arrives quietly, the same way Tavian moves through the world. Later, when Cedric is standing at the door to leave, he says one thing. Only one. Same way he says everything low, direct, without performance attached to it. I didn't need the files to shut down what was running through that terminal. Tavian looks at him. I had enough information. My team had been flagging inconsistencies in that subcontract network for 8 months. I had the resources. I had the standing. I had the access. He pauses. Not for effect. Because the next part is the true part and he is making sure he says it right. What I didn't have. His eyes stay on Tavian. Direct. The same quality of attention that was there from the very beginning, the attention that sees rather than scans, was someone who had been inside it, who looked at it directly, not from a financial audit, not from a carrier report, from the ground, from the rafters of a loading bay at 2:30 in the morning. He pauses again. You showed me where to look. Tavian stands in the doorway of his apartment. He does not reach for his notebook. Some things do not need a written response. Cedric says good night. He leaves. And Tavian stands in his kitchen on Ferris Street, in his apartment with the fixed bracket and the ceramic mug and the rain through the window, and lets himself feel the full weight of something that has been true for a long time but that he is only now, in this specific moment, able to hold without flinching. The world does not only change because someone with power decides to act. Sometimes it changes because someone quiet refused to look away. Even when looking away would have been safer. Even when no one would have blamed them for it. Even when the cost of looking was 7 months of boarding houses and counted coins and waking up in the dark and carrying the only copy of the truth inside a ceramic mug on a shelf above a sink in a basement apartment that nobody important would ever have reason to visit. Tavian pours hot water into the mug. Places it on the table. Sits down. The rain moves through the window. The shelf holds. And for the first time since the story began, he sits in his kitchen without listening for footsteps that are not coming, without checking the bag, without running any kind of calculation in the back of his mind about what the next sound might mean. He just sits, present, here. This is what safe feels like. Not loud, not announced, just this. If Tavian's story moved something in you today, if his quiet refusal to look away reminded you of your own strength, or of someone you love who carried more than anyone ever saw, share this with one person who needs to hear it right now. Subscribe to this channel and turn on your notifications so you never miss a story like this one. Every week this channel brings you a new story. Stories about people who were passed over and underestimated. People who changed something not because they were the loudest in the room, but because they were brave enough to stay when staying was hard. Drop a comment below and tell us what part of Tavian's story stayed with you. Your words in that comment section are not small. Someone scrolling through this channel right now needs to read exactly what you are about to write. This community exists because of you. And every story told here carries the same reminder. Quiet does not mean small. Invisible does not mean gone. And sometimes the most powerful thing a person can do is simply refuse to look away.